Okay, so I think we'll just kick it off here. My name is Amy Stock, and I'm the manager of the Neurology Career Center. We're excited to offer Neurology Career Week webinars this week, and especially for today's presentation on negotiating your employment contract. So something that happens to everybody. Every practicing neurologist at some point is probably going to have an employment contract, unless you're in private practice. Presenting today, I have Hannah and Andy from RosmanSearch. And then I would just encourage you to participate in the webinar via the chat function. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation, if you just want to enter those into the chat, we'll do a Q&A with Hannah and Andy at the end of the presentation and get those questions answered. I would also just like to remind everybody, the virtual career fair is going on again today from 4 to 7 p.m. and that's Eastern time. And you can access that through the Neurology Career Center at careers.aan.com. And I am going to turn it over to Hannah and Andy.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Amy mentioned, my name is Hannah. I'm joined by my colleague, Andy. The two of us work for a permanent placement physician recruitment firm where we have specialized recruitment teams, and Andy and I are on the neurology team. So we are focused in neurology recruiting, talking to neurologists on the candidate side, and then academic medical centers, community hospitals, multi-state large health systems, private practice, solo practice, pretty much any type of neurology employment situation that could possibly exist. We've seen it where we work with them. So we're here to share some of the insight that we've gathered from doing what we do day in, day out. So we're really excited to be here with you on such an important topic. Just like Amy said, it's something that comes up every time you're in a job search. You know, that's the goal, is to get the offer, to know how to move forward with negotiations. So I'm just going to get us started with a brief overview of when you're getting your offer, what that stage will typically look like, how to start navigating, you know, if you are seeing multiple offers at one time, and how to move forward. And then Andy will pick things up in the middle to start talking about negotiation tactics and tips, things to keep in mind, how you want to interact with that stage of the process. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll have given you lots to think about. We are excited for the Q&A part of this session so that you guys can ask anything that comes to mind when we have these, when we go through the topics. Do also want to mention that all of the content here is developed by RosmanSearch, not the AAN, and Andy and I certainly are not lawyers. So please, if you do need legal advice, seek out an attorney.
Hannah, I'm not seeing the slides. Can you make those visible?
Oh, sure, yes. Okay, it says it's on the sharing screen.
I can see her slides.
You can? Oh. I'm sorry.
I think you might just need to go into view, either side by side or speaker.
Okay, I'm sorry, Hannah, continue.
No problem, but we can definitely see it. Okay, great. So yes, seek out a lawyer if you need legal advice. And then to get started, you know, the offer stage, like we said, is definitely the goal of getting into your job search process. You want to be meeting with that program and for them to like you as much as you like them. You've been through a lot at this point. If you're getting to the offer stage, you've gone on a site visit, you've talked with a number of people, lots of providers, lots of admin. So this is the big culmination of the whole process. So take a step back, celebrate. It's exciting. Congratulations to you. That's a huge, huge accomplishment. So do take some time to celebrate what's happened here. You know, somebody wants to hire you. So we do want to start off with a little bit of celebrating the big moment. And then we want to talk about the types of offers that exist because, different programs will approach this stage differently. So you want to know what's the offer you're receiving, the format that it is in, so that you can best engage with it, make sure that you are getting the necessary information you need at this step. And then also to know if this is just a preliminary offer, a summary of the things, then you're probably can expect a contract a little bit later. So not to get too caught up on preliminary offer details so that you can get to that contract stage, see the full bulk of information of what your employment agreement looks like. So when we're starting off, one thing we always like to remind people is that you are still very much in an interview kind of space when you are getting the offer. These practices, they're still looking at how you interact with the information, how you interact with the admin and the providers that you're talking to about your offer. If you have a lawyer who's really aggressive on your behalf, kind of navigating these waters for you instead of stepping forward and taking ownership and really taking kind of the initiative to look into the situation that's going to be most relevant to you. Everybody's kind of observing this and still very much an interview light. So the goal is to really move forward with gratefulness, appreciation, thankfulness that they've considered you for this opportunity, thankfulness for their time thus far, and really taking this as a serious step. We do want to remind everyone that you still very much are in an interview space here. So the goal of your offer letter is definitely to understand to the best of your ability at this stage and with the information they've given you, you want to understand your employer's expectations. So you want to look through your offer and make sure that the most important parts that you can engage with are included. So one of the offer formats that you'll typically see in this space is a letter of intent. It's usually no longer than 1 to 2 pages. It's pretty comprehensive of salary and compensation details as well as other employment benefits. So you might see this as a 2-page Word document, letter format, and then an attachment that has the glossy hospital photo kind of info pamphlet about your hospital benefits, your employment benefits, that kind of thing. But the key details are going to be in that initial document, the one that's only a couple of pages long. So yes, it will include your salary information. It'll include sometimes, your CME budget, your clinical schedule, expectations, any vacation time you might have. Those bullet points will be hit in your offer letter. So you want to really look into this. If the salary is off, you want to be in a conversation with the practice about what you were looking for in a salary. And Andy will get into best ways to have that conversation a little bit later. But if your clinical schedule looks different from what you've discussed previously with the practice and the written form isn't really matching what you had understood from your previous discussions, this is the time to kind of recognize what's on paper is what the hospital would expect of you if you join on. So clarifying anything at this stage would be really important. So you want to look through, you want to do a little bit of research, asking your mentors, asking hiring contacts, the person who made the offer to you about anything you're unclear about, and also kind of knowing, what is pretty typical for a hospital of this type, for a position this type. So you're going in with some kind of understanding of what's expected, what's pretty typical in the market, and then going from there, what this particular program can do for you. A letter of intent will typically require a signature, so that's a pretty serious step. We tend to think of that as almost an engagement. Nobody wants to be that person who takes a ring and doesn't make it down the aisle. So you really do want to take this very seriously, pursue in good faith if you are signing on to a letter of intent. It isn't legally binding. I do have to mention that. So if you sign a letter of intent, it's not legally binding, but it is, a good faith gesture that you do plan to take these next steps seriously in negotiation and all for the goal of joining their practice. Sometimes practices will choose to discuss the terms verbally. That might happen on your site visit, in a specific meeting with an HR person. That might be in a follow-up conversation on the phone with the department chair, something that you're touching base about what this program, what an offer from this program is going to look like. And then usually the practice or whoever was your contact explaining these things will send a summary in writing of what happened. If they don't, it's definitely fine to ask for something in writing. We've seen it several different ways. It could be an email summary. It can be a letter of intent after they've gone through the verbal offer stage. So just keep an eye out. If anything was discussed offer-wise verbally, feel free to ask for it in writing or expect something in writing, a summary to come in a little bit after. And you don't have to feel like you have to accept a verbal offer on the spot, by the way. Definitely take a beat, review your notes, what you had discussed, and think about it. And then, wait for the written details to come along or ask for written details. But yes, don't feel put on the spot if somebody is telling you what an offer might look like verbally. And then the contract, that's the big bulk of everything. That's going to be your legal, long, lengthy document. It's going to be sent very encrypted and formally, might be overnighted, FedEx. That's the big thing. So that's going to have signatures from all levels of, admin and providers in the practice. So it's going to take a little bit to get that document completed and out to you and looking good. So a lot of the negotiation, which Andy will cover, does happen at these preliminary offer stages so that you can kind of fine tune the nitty-gritty of everything before going back and engaging with the legal document, just because that has to go to a whole different department. Lawyers have to look over it, people have to sign off on it. So it's a little bit lengthier of the time. So I say that and kind of list all these different offer types so that if you're getting something that's very legalese and you feel like you need to talk to a lawyer about it, which we do recommend, having a lawyer look over your contract and explaining the terms to you, that's kind of the final stage of how the offer could be presented. If it's a short document, brief summary, you're probably at the letter of intent stage. Figure out what your salary terms and your clinical work terms will look like, and then get on to the contract stage. So try not to get too hung up on anything that's preliminary so that you can get to that full contract in a timely fashion. So regardless of what your offer format is, it definitely should include salary information. If you don't know by the end of seeing your offer what you're going to be paid, please do not sign that document. Definitely be clear on what salary and compensation looks like for you. This is a really great opportunity to dig into how the practice pays, to kind of question what it's going to look like if you're changing to a different compensation model after an initial term period of your contract, what the compensation model that other providers in the group are on, and if that might impact you, that kind of thing. It's a good time to get really curious about what this all looks like. So some of the compensation models we typically see in the field, most common tends to be a salary plus bonus model. They'll start you out at a certain salary amount, and then you have opportunity to make bonus income, and that can be based off group productivity, individual productivity, and it's usually measured by what's known as an RVU. So each practice tends to do things a little differently, have a different formula to calculate, salary, RVU threshold, everything like that. So you really do want to ask and be engaging with your practice if it doesn't make sense from the offer, what that looks like for you in terms of their specific compensation model. Other models can include straight salary, where you earn a set amount annually and it's not based on your annual productivity. That we usually see in our academic offers. It incentivizes a lot of non-clinical activities. So you have your protected time for research and teaching activities, the things that are really important to university medical centers and academic teams. Another way that we've seen compensation go is pure productivity, where everything you earn is based off your billings. So again, just being clear on your RVUs and your reimbursement rates, if that's the kind of offer they're making you. And then sometimes we see an income guarantee. Often this is kind of a protective measure so that when you are moving to your new practice and getting started, they know it can take some time to ramp up and to get settled and get your compensation to where you were at an established practice, or if you're a new grad, to where you want to be. So they give you a little bit of a cushion. And it's set at a guaranteed income rate for your annual. And then maybe after your initial contract term of 1 to 2 years, that could change over to pure productivity or salary plus productivity based bonus. So it can be complex. You definitely want to fully understand what the terms of your guarantee are and what that switch might look like. And a healthcare attorney can be really great for helping you walk you through those terms and helping you to better understand what your compensation is going to look like. Because that's very important for if you are going to switch, so you can anticipate any changes to your financials, because that will definitely be impactful. So you want to kind of have a heads up of where you're going, what the practice is pretty typically used to, and so you can best navigate that. You want to be able to communicate with your practice about any response deadlines to your offer, if that changes the exclusivity of your offer. We've seen some practices that hire on a rolling basis. So when they find a candidate they like, they make an offer, they tell you you have 2 weeks to respond. If by the second week you're not in a position to accept or decline, we will reopen recruitment for the position, continue talking to candidates, and if we find somebody we like, we're going to make them an offer. So if that's the situation at your practice, you want to know that sooner rather than later. Sometimes, you know, there is that deadline before they start to feel like they need to move forward and they don't want an open offer left on the table, so they will go ahead and rescind the offer, or, you know, bring a close to that opportunity for you. So again, you want to be aware if that's going to happen with this particular practice in your offer. You need to be aware of timelines and when you need to be responding. Communication is just so key. I mean, you'll find it throughout this entire job search process, but definitely most important than ever when you're talking about money and job hiring terms. So make sure that you're communicating directly with the practice, you're understanding kind of the limits of responses and exclusivity, but you do want to try your best to meet the deadline, the response deadline, so that the program is aware if you're considering their opportunity or not. And it's totally fine if you do need to wait a little bit before seeing an offer. If you have 3-4 more site visits left, this was your very first site visit, and you have a couple more programs to meet with, a couple more interviews and engagements to honor, it's perfectly fine to tell the practice, hey, I just need, you know, 1 more month to finish my search and explore all opportunities. And then, you know, come mid-November, I will be able to give you an answer, that kind of thing. It just helps everyone have, you know, the clearest of expectations, the communication is strong. You are building a relationship at this point with potentially your future employers. So they're taking note of this, of your ability to engage with them and be communicative and upfront about what you need. And so being very cognizant of your communication at this stage is really, really helpful and important. So when you are in the situation of having multiple offers and you're looking on how to choose the best offer for you, I just want to stress the you part of that situation. The best offer in the market might not be the best offer for you personally. There's a lot involved in an offer and in an opportunity, so you really want to take the time to reflect on your own personal priorities, how you started the search. If you and your family knew that you needed to be in the South and this is a job offer in the North that you're really excited about, you know, you need to take the time to consider, is it going to realistically work for me to be in this location? That was a stretch for me and outside of, you know, my goal priorities for the search. It just goes off of whatever is a priority to you in your life and how the offer and the job opportunity best align with that. It's okay to talk to your mentors, your family, friends about, what you're considering in the offer. Try to keep as much confidential as possible, but talking through these things often helps. Being a soundboard, people who've done this before, your co-fellows, your co-residents who graduated and successfully found jobs, picking their brain for how they navigated these waters, and in this entire stage, it helps a lot just to be able to talk through things. So feel very free to reflect and talk with your trusted mentors and friends and family. Kind of what I had touched on earlier, you want to do some research when you're heading into, engaging with your offer and negotiations. Make sure you know kind of what's the going rate in the area, what the going rate for your type of position typically is, and being able to see, if you can negotiate on any of those terms and be able to match what you're looking for in an offer. If there's something that a practice is telling you is kind of a no-go, it's a little inflexible, we can't change this, everyone in our practice does this thing, and it would be, we're not able to just change it for you specifically. I think we see this come up most often with call requirements. Some neurologists will want to get into the job opportunity looking for taking no night call, and the hospital bylaws state everyone must take 10 days of call per month. So, it's really inflexible. It's always nice to, maybe if you hit it off with a neurologist in the group when you were on the site visit, picking their brains, seeing how they, how they work through call scheduling and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis for that neurologist. Talking to the administrator who made you the offer, they might be the practice manager and also in tune with the scheduling and how that all works. Just asking them, more questions, more information about what the, I'm so sorry, about what the situation that you're finding difficult to move forward in the offer about, just finding out how flexible it might be. So again, with conversation, with engaging directly with the practice, all of this information, can be yours. So get curious, ask around, do some research, and see if there's any wiggle room with anything you might be finding inflexible in your offer. Another good best tip for moving forward with your offer when you're looking to negotiate, and Andy will elaborate, but you do want to kind of schedule a time to talk about anything that you might have changes you want to submit. It's very tempting, and we see it all the time, to kind of draft an email of everything that looks wrong in your offer letter, send it off to the practice manager and let them deal with it, go about your day. It kind of just hits as overwhelming. It can come across wrong if it's, just kind of a list of demands almost that's being communicated. So again, it's a relationship building step. These are hopefully your future employers and people you're going to be working with day in, day out. So you want to do everything possible to continue building that relationship, talking with the practice, seeing how you guys can meet in the middle, and making things work. So scheduling a time will definitely help you speak about these things and move on to the next stage, which is to see that full contract and get the bulk of information about your employment terms. So I'm going to hand it over to Andy now, so he can give you all some tips about how to negotiate your offer.
Thank you, Hannah. So let's talk about everybody's favorite subject, compensation, and how you're going to get paid. There are a number of factors to consider when looking at, a contract and seeing the salary. Some of the things that affect how much you'll be paid is, your subspecialty interest, whether you're pediatric neurology or interventional neurology. There's a pretty wide range. How busy you are, how many patients you're seeing per day, how productive you're going to be. One of the biggest factors, I think, is in addition to the employment model and your subspecialty, is where you live. Normally, it's based on like supply and demand. So if you're interested in Southern California, there's a lot more neurologists that are interested in living there typically than there are in North Dakota or, more in the Midwest. So typically we see lower compensation in kind of the larger metropolitan areas than we do in the more rural locations. And then also, your employment model. historically, we see academics paying less than, community or private places. And then just kind of a rule of thumb, I had worked with a neurologist that was great. She had got an offer for $380, and something to make sure you're cognizant of is if you do get an offer and it has a big guarantee up front, you want to know how you're going to be paid after that guarantee is over. I ended up checking the references for this neurologist. She, clinically sound, very methodical, which was kind of code for she's not going to see a ton of patients. So I was working with the CEO of this hospital, and they had an RVU threshold of roughly like 7,500 RVUs. She was never going to hit that mark after her first year, so she was going to take a pay decrease. So you want to make sure your expectations for your compensation align with the expectations of the hospital or practice you're looking at. So we were able to negotiate her base salary down, but also her RVU target down. So that way she wasn't going to take a big pay decrease after that first year. So they ended up coming down to like 3,500 RVUs, which was much more realistic for her, and giving her still a base salary of like 330 with a significant amount of student loan forgiveness. You want to go to the next slide, Hannah? So these are some of the more recent offers we've seen for community-based practices. Most of the community-based practices are paying over 300 for just about any subspecialty. There are outliers on both ends, though. I've seen practices that are starting neurologists out at like 450. Again, most of the time those places are in more rural locations, but I've also seen practices that are below that 300 threshold. But most of the contracts that we've reviewed recently for community-based positions, whether you're a vascular, epileptologist, whatever it may be, have been above that 300 mark. But again, you want to be aware of how your long-term compensation is going to be structured and whether you're going to move into productivity eventually and what those numbers look like before you sign any agreements. Go to the next slide. So these are opportunities and offers that we've reviewed for like true main campus academic institutions. These are kind of your flagship university-based positions. There's not a lot that are going to be above 300 from what we've been seeing in the market. But again, there's a lot of factors in considering an academic offer. Are you going to have protected research time? How many patients are you going to be expected to see per day? Are you going to ever move into productivity? And you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the base salary, but also, again, one of the most important things is to understand how the compensation is going to be structured long term. I've worked with a number of neurologists in the past. Every time I get a call from somebody in practice, I try to figure out why they're looking to make a move at this point. And on occasions, it does come up that, I had a great guaranteed salary, but, I'm an epileptologist and there's already 2 epileptologists here and I'm not hitting my target goals. And so I ended up taking a pay decrease. So they're looking for another job. So again, making sure the expectations you have align with the expectations of whatever your employment model is very, very important. You can go ahead to the next slide, Hannah. Okay, let's talk about some resources. Just kind of a rule of thumb, if you ever get a call from a recruiter and they ask you to sign an exclusive agreement, run the other direction as fast as possible. We encourage everybody we work with to look on their own, talk to their mentors, use the resources they have. We have a number of resources, but the AAN Career Center has articles, on just a lot of information that could be very helpful during this time. The junior members actually have access to a salary calculator. So you can log in, create an account on the AAN, and there's a salary calculator there that you can use to kind of figure out what you might be, what your offer might look like and where it needs to be. So make sure you're utilizing all your resources. Don't look through only one person. You can search online. The AAN Career Center has a number of opportunities listed on there. Use Google. But our goal, and any recruiter you work with, their goal should be to find the best place for you and your family, whether it's through their firm or on your own. So you worked really hard, you went on all these site visits, and you finally got a contract. Yay, it's over. It's not. You are still interviewing through the negotiation process. Please don't ever list bullet point items and send them over to the future employer. Words can be taken out of context. I've seen offers rescinded. And you need to be reasonable, but they also need to be reasonable. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and maybe you have an offer from a different program that's $150,000 more than what they're offering. So you think it's unrealistic that they would ever come up that high. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey, I think my family would be a better fit for this community. I really like your program. I find myself being more successful there. I do have another offer for XYZ amount. I don't know if you can come up at all, but do you have any flexibility? And then see what they say instead of saying, hey, can you match this other offer that's way more than what you guys are offering? It goes a lot farther than just writing an email bullet point saying you need that number. Remember, you're still building a relationship, which is hopefully going to be long-term. So you don't want to try to burn any bridges, or it shouldn't be a battle or a fight. It should be a conversation to come to terms that you guys both can agree on. So the negotiation process, always acknowledge you received an agreement. I've had clients send out offers to candidates and they don't get back to them in a week or two. And they're like, hey, are they even interested? And it's like, well, yeah, he's probably on call, but even if it's off your phone, thank you so much. Even if you don't think you'd ever move forward with that program, they thought highly enough of you to extend an offer. So be grateful, be gracious, and acknowledge you got it as soon as you see it. Just send over a quick email back. Hey, thank you so much. I received the offer. I'm going to take a look at it with my family. Let me get back to you in a week or two. Again, never negotiate via text or email because words can be taken out of context. And be thoughtful about the changes you're asking for. I had a neurologist I was working with at one point that was considering an academic program in a area that had a very high cost of living. The spouse was a writer. They had 3 children at home. The spouse was not a high income earner. They offered her a very low salary of I think it was like 150 or 160. And she called me and she's like, I don't know. I really want to be here, but I can't make that work with the cost of living and everything else. It's just unrealistic for me. What do you think I should do? And I said, you need to explain that to whoever the key stakeholder is that you're negotiating the contract with and see if you can come to a conclusion on it. So she did. She said she actually was able to go there in person and sit down with the chairman of the department and kind of explain her situation. And they ended up giving her a $20,000 pay increase. But what they also offered her was a housing stipend because they really liked her too. But if she would have just sent an email back, it probably wouldn't have worked out like that. They probably wouldn't have had that much flexibility. But if you're able to explain things, they're more likely to go a little bit farther and go a little bit more above what they would normally do. If you can be thoughtful about the things you're asking for and the changes you're hoping to make. Okay. Always have a contract attorney look things over. So take that with an asterisk next to it. The attorney should be there to make you aware of anything you need to be concerned about, not to negotiate on your behalf. I have had one candidate that I had worked with that got a red line agreement back in her inbox, and I think she just forwarded it along, didn't even look at it. I don't know if she knew this attorney personally or what, but there were some inappropriate comments in the redlined agreement and it was immediately rescinded. They said, yeah, we're not going to work with you anymore. So yes, contract attorneys are very important and I do recommend using them, but they should never negotiate on your behalf and they shouldn't go through and wordsmith the agreement either. A lot of these big health systems have kind of set standard agreements. And if they're going through and changing and or and trying to change a bunch of little things, the legal team at the hospital normally will just ignore all of that. So any big changes, anything that the attorney thinks you need to be concerned about, make sure you go back again, have a verbal conversation, not just an email exchange about the agreement. And then also, I don't want to say you only get one chance at negotiating an agreement, but it's very beneficial to try to list, even if it's only for your own personal benefit, so you don't miss anything. But it takes time for them to go back and forth with their legal team. So try to get all your requests up front and have like a period of time where you go through the entire agreement, request the changes, and have them take it back, because you don't want to be going back and forth with the legal team. Oh yeah, I forgot about the non-compete clause. Can we talk about that now? It's better to have everything up front. And then you can also use compensation data. I know there's a number of surveys out there that are available. I believe the AAN has done them in the past as well. And you can use other offers to try to negotiate your way up to a higher salary as well. So if you are only interested in New York City or Los Angeles or Miami, don't be afraid to look at some of the programs that might be a little bit outside of that large metropolitan area, because they're more than likely going to give you a higher offer. And even though the program in the metropolitan area might not be able to match that, you can use that as a tool to try to at least come up a little bit so you don't leave any money on the table. Go ahead, Anna. So remember, when you're negotiating, it shouldn't be a battle. You're really trying to build a long-term relationship and come to a conclusion that benefits both you and your future employer. This is hopefully going to be the first stage of a very long-term relationship. Make sure that your expectations for the practice, whether it be how productive you are, how much subspecialization you have available, how much research time you have available, align with the expectations of the practice, and make sure you have that conversation up front. I had worked with a stroke neurologist at one point who was had like a 5-year plan to be the director of the stroke program that was primary at the time, and they wanted this individual to take them to comprehensive. And I said, that's great, sounds like a great opportunity. She got to the contract stage, and I said, have you talked about the resources that are available? Have you talked about like your budget to move this program from primary to comprehensive? Because a biplane suite's roughly about $10 million to build for the big brick walls and the equipment, not to mention like an endovascular neurosurgeon or interventional neurologist. She's like, actually, I haven't. So before she signed the agreement, she sat down, and come to find out, like they'd only offered her $250,000 in her first year to help build this program out to comprehensive. And that doesn't even really buy the software needed to move it to comprehensive. So she was able to negotiate that part before she signed the official agreement. So just make sure that if you are looking at a position, you kind of have the expectations of the practice and what their ideas are align with what your thoughts are about the position. And again, trust is much more important than a piece of paper. I'm a firm believer in following your gut. If it feels right, it probably is. It's like trying on a pair of shoes. It's either going to fit or not. A contract's only going to protect you so far. And building the relationship as you negotiate your contract, you should get a pretty good feeling if okay, this administration works well with the neurologist, and they're going to be supportive for me long term. Because there's nothing I hate more than somebody coming right out of fellowship and 6 months later they're already looking for a job because they didn't do the work up front. And now they're having to relocate their family again, move, look for a position. They're always going to have to explain why they were only at this program for 6 months to future employers. And it's better to make sure you have all of the details up front and you trust this employer. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact Hannah or I, or you can just go to RosmanSearch. All of our neurology recruiters are on there. I don't know if any of you are already working with some of them. And then again, the Neurology Career Fair, which has been fantastic, even though I wish the fall AAN was still happening in person. We love that conference, but this is great. I know there's a lot of hospitals that are attending. So make sure if you are looking for a position to log in, I believe it goes till Friday this week from 4 to 7. And we also have over 100 neurology positions active on our website. If you have any interest in looking at what's available, feel free to log on there. And there's random prize drawings, so don't miss it. Make sure you log into the career fair. Do we have any questions?
Thanks, Andy. I'll go to chat right now. So if you do have a question for either Andy or Hannah, who did the first half of the presentation regarding negotiations, advice, enter them in the chat box. and we'll share those with everyone. Give you a couple of minutes, and then I will say that Rosman has graciously agreed to donate noise canceling headphones for a drawing that we'll take after the webinar is completed, and a participating physician in the webinar today will win those headphones. So thank you, Rosman.
Thank you, Amy. It's always a pleasure working with you and being part of the AA, and you guys are phenomenal. Hannah, I think somebody had wrote in, could we show the compensation slides again, please?
Oh, yeah. Academic, community. What would we
I
like?
don't think they had a.
We
You
can
have a
linger on
preference?
both.
Doesn't say, so here's the community practice one, and then maybe share the academic one as well.
And Amy, if they're interested in receiving this information, are we fine?
We are
emailing it
recording
over?
the webinar, so this
Okay,
will, I did
perfect.
forget to say that. This will be available after the fact through the Career Center. Will be available as a download, hopefully by next week. Okay, so we shared the webinar slides. Anybody else have any other questions? For Hannah or Andy, valuable information here, valuable resources. A lot of great information to share.
If you guys do have specific questions, maybe you're in the middle of a contract negotiation about how to approach something, you know, I think Hannah's been here for, I think, 5 years. I've been doing this for almost 7. So we're happy to help. We only work in neurology specifically. And I know it's a small field. So if you have questions about how to approach something, what you think an offer should look like, or if you have questions about maybe an area of the country that you're looking at, because it does have a very wide range. I think the median income for neurology when I started here was like 260 something. And this past year, I think it was like 330, a little over 330,000. So it's continued to go up, which is really good for you guys. Is there a lawyer that you can recommend? So we do not endorse any attorneys. We do have a list of attorneys that neurologists we've worked with in the past have said good things about. So if you are interested in like an attorney or somebody that we would recommend, again, we don't endorse anybody. We have a nice, if you make it on our document of attorneys, that means that other people have had good experiences with you in the past. It's a pretty short list, but we can't send you that via email.
And also just keeping in mind when you are looking into attorneys to get someone with a healthcare background, someone with healthcare contracts experience, really want to make it tailored to what you specifically are getting into. And also with the attorney, having your first contract. I've seen some attorneys offer like a special rate for new grads who are reviewing their first employment contract, a flat fee. They'll give you like a 1 hour on the phone consultation with an attorney if you send them over your contract. So keep an eye for some of those special rates for first time employment review.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. What is the ideal time to start the search for fellows?
That's a great question. We typically recommend, and it'll definitely be based off of your own personal requirements. So typically 12 months before your anticipated start date is our recommended kind of rule of thumb range to start in. If you are on a training visa or a training visa, if you're a fellow training visa, J1, and you need a waiver, we do recommend you start a little bit earlier just because you want to have your contract signed, your paperwork and case file ready to go and submit for that application deadline for your state for one of the Conrad 30 waivers or some of the other organizations that offer waivers for underserved areas. You want to have all that paperwork in and complete, which definitely includes a signed contract, proof of full-time employment, so that they can switch you onto an H-1B. All of that needs to be wrapped up roughly 6 to 10 months before you're going to start that next following year. So we do recommend getting a head start, maybe closer to that 16 to 18 month range before your anticipated start date for fellows. Also, the state you're looking at. State medical licensing. There's been backups in California since the dawn of time. That might take you 9 to 12 months to get a California state license. So if you know for sure you're moving out there, get a head start, get an early start talking to practices, or go ahead and apply for a medical license yourself. If you know that you're moving out there, some practices reimburse for the costs after you've signed on with them, that kind of thing. But just be cognizant of where you're hoping to be, what extra considerations you might have to take to get there, and starting your search in a timely fashion then. And then if you have no considerations whatsoever, you feel like your job search is going to be pretty straightforward and normal, you still want to save some time. There's going to be a bucket load of paperwork at the tail end of this whole thing. So as soon as you sign the contract, they're just going to ship you over all your credentialing stuff, all of the hospital paperwork that needs to get done, and that will take some time too. So leave some time for that paperwork, for your licensing to get moved out there and you know, get started on time. Just give yourself that cushion by starting around 12 to 18 months before your anticipated start date.
More questions. Great and useful presentation. If I have to go to private practice, how do I get malpractice insurance?
So a lot of private practices do provide malpractice insurance. It's based on obviously individual private practices. The majority of the ones we've worked with in the past do offer, you know, malpractice, and you also want to discuss tail coverage. Some of them do not provide tail coverage, but it really is beneficial for both, you know, the employee or the person joining the practice and the practice itself. There are ways to get malpractice insurance. You could just log in and look on your own and pay out of your own pocket, but I would say the majority of the ones we've worked with anyway in the past provide that. And then for healthcare, find out which lawyers are good with healthcare. So we do keep a list of attorneys that are familiar with like healthcare, and we also have a list of immigration attorneys that we've worked with that specialize in like physician visas. So we're happy to send that over to you, or, you know, talk to your mentors, talk to other people, other fellows that might have gone through this process, see if they have anybody they might recommend. It's always good to get a referral from somebody that's had a good experience. And I know the retainer fee can vary pretty greatly, so it might be good to do some shopping around as well. Again, that the attorney is good and very useful, but they're really not supposed to go through and wordsmith it. And I've seen a lot of attorneys do that, where they just go and redline like an entire agreement. And if you're looking at any of the bigger health systems, they said a lot of them just have that set in place for all their positions, so there's not a lot of room. So we're happy to send that list over to you for the attorneys as well. Would you have any numbers on compensation for teleneurology? Yes, we have some data available for the teleneurology companies that are out there. I've seen a few offers. Normally it depends on a lot of different factors though, how many hospitals you're covering, what type of teleneurology you're providing, what your work schedule looks like. So if you have questions specific to a telemedicine program, I mean, I've seen offers above 3, I've seen offers below 3. I've seen some offers that go above the 400 range, but a lot of that has to do with like how many stroke alerts you're getting if you're doing telestroke, how many hospitals you're going to cover, what's your call structure look like, and a lot of it's based upon each, you know, call that you get, and not so much around just a guaranteed base salary.
Okay, and then are the community practice offers listed for a standard number of patient contact hours and patient visit lengths? I think that would vary probably per case. Also, do you negotiate compensation measures at level of offer when initially presented or contract? Thank you.
So yes, there are sometimes like A lot of hospitals will do either an hour for a new patient, half hour for follow-up. I've seen other ones that do like 45 minutes for new patients and 15 minutes for follow-up. But again, those are kind of arbitrary times. And I just spoke with the director of a neurology program in Tennessee earlier this week because he had got on the phone with a fellow and said it was, you know, a half hour for new patients, 15 minutes for follow-ups. And I'm like, you're scaring all the fellows away because that's very, very busy. He's like, well, we're flexible. We're not going to let them fail. But like, that's, you know, once you get up and running, that's kind of what the expectation is after you get a little bit of experience. And I'm like, well, did you share that with him? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, he's probably not interested anymore. So again, they will sometimes put arbitrary lengths of time, but if you're going in and seeing, you know, routine MS follow-up patient that hasn't, you know, developed severe MS yet, it's a lot different than going in and doing an evaluation with, you know, an entire family present for, you know, somebody with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So yes, give and take a little bit, but it is good to find that out up front. I don't recommend having the first call and asking, you know, what's your patient evaluation times? Because sometimes the older neurologists might have the interpretation, even though I know nobody's lazy and doesn't want to work, but they might interpret it as, oh, this person doesn't want to work. So there are other ways to ask that as well, where, you know, tell me about a regular day. On average, you know, how many patients do your outpatient neurologist see, instead of saying, you know, how many patients am I going to be required to see and how much time do I have? So just the way you approach things and how you present yourself is important when having that discussion with a future employer.
And along that thread, with the intro calls and what's kind of good to discuss and what might wait till a little bit later, salary, compensation information. I can't tell you how many times Andy and I get calls from our clients who say that the candidate hopped on that first phone call and only asked, how much do you pay? You know, and it came across as, what can I get from you? I'm not really that interested just yet in the opportunity. I'm just trying to like match a dollar amount. And they know salary is important to you. We know that, you know that. So it's going to get discussed. And we definitely say, if you've made it to an on-site visit and nobody has told you what the salary will be, please ask that. That information should be discussed by the time you're meeting with everyone in person, or, you know, in this day and age, having your virtual interviews and you've met about 10 different people across 2 days. You know, you've built some relationship there, some rapport there. It's okay to go ahead and ask if they haven't given you that information. But starting off on the first impression with asking about compensation or vacation time, or you know, some of these finer tuned details of the employment benefits tend to come across a little bit off if you start too early with that. So just be cognizant, aware of how your discussions are going, what stage you're kind of in, and that information will definitely come because it's important. Like we said, don't sign anything if you haven't found out what your salary is yet. That's a point where you should definitely have that information discussed for sure.
Right. And I just had last week a fellow that was very limited in his time to go out on site visits, and he had a conversation with 2 of our clients and was very direct. How much are you going to pay me? Can you offer 4 days a week during like the initial call? And the client screened him out. And so the way you approach it is very important. If you are limited in your availability, maybe you already have an offer on in hand, and you're considering another opportunity, but you want to make sure that it's going to be competitive so you're not wasting anyone's time. You can pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, I don't want to waste anyone's time. I do have an offer for this amount. I just want to make sure that it's going to be competitive because I don't want to waste your time coming in for a site visit if it's not going to be within this range. You don't have to give me a specific number, but I want to be cognizant of your time and my availability to go in for site visits. That sounds a lot better than just going in like that individual did and peppering the chairman of the department with, how much are you going to pay me and can I work 4 days a week? Because that's how, even though the candidate wasn't trying to come off that way as kind of not a team player and arrogant, that's the way that the chairman interpreted the conversation they had. So that was a very difficult conversation. I had to go back and tell him, but again, the way you present yourself and the way you ask questions is very important.
All right, I don't see any new questions coming in here in the chat box. As always, a wealth of information here regarding contracts. I really appreciate Hannah and Andy's time today. This was a great webinar. We've recorded it. It'll be available on the website. Make plans to participate in the virtual career fair today from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern time, available on the Career Center site. Directions include now how to access via mobile and phone, so everybody can participate no matter what their schedule looks like. Oh, one new message.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, this was very helpful. Thank you so much. Yep, I second that.
Well,
All right,
thank you.
guys.
Yeah, thank you, Amy and Tabitha, for letting us be a part of this. It was a lot of fun. We always appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thanks. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone.